Hi, Dr. Dave Collins, and welcome to the Science of Psychotherapy podcast. How are you?
Really well, thanks, Matt. Yeah, how are you guys?
We're doing well.
And hello from me, Dave. You can't get away from the two of us.
Always Richard. And let me just say from the start that thank you so much for this wonderful program that you guys have put together. I just love it. One of my great weekly traditions is going for a run on a Friday afternoon, and one of my favourite things to do is put the earbuds in and tune into one of your wonderful podcasts. And the lovely bit about it is where I run, which is around Parkville in Melbourne here. There's a lot of wonderful science institutions that have been responsible for some fantastic discoveries in neuroscience. So there's a lovely bit of synergy as I'm running around releasing some BDNF and trying to get some hippocampal health happening in my brain.
Fantastic. That's great. And I'll tell you what, in preparation for the work, I mean, I've been familiar with BrainGrow for a while, but we've done a little, Matt and I have done a little bit of a video program of BrainGrow, because you've got this whole host of presentations on the website that people can instantly get an insight into what's going on. So that's something that we'll straight up tell people that they'll go to. We'll have links to that, won't we, in the show notes?
Absolutely. So let's just jump in, Dave. For those that don't know you, I know a lot of children know you and know your face, but for those of us in psychotherapy world that don't know about you, give us just a little brief background about where you've come from.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. And started life working in public mental health and also in research. And then over the years, transitioned more towards private practice. And as my private practice is grown, so too has the work I do outside of my private practice, particularly in schools, where I go around to a lot of schools and do workshops for parents and teachers and the kids themselves. And that's really a big part of the reason where BrainGrow kind of came from, where I was a little bit overserviced in my private practice and ultimately just had too many referrals. So I thought I'd write a program for the kids that the teachers can run, and it's grown from there.
That's wonderful. Now you are so you're working with kids and you're working with the adults, the teachers as well. So how does that work in the program?
Yeah, so the program, I really thought about how to start the program, and initially my thought was, well, maybe I'll go into the schools and run the program myself, but then I really sat down and thought about it, and what I worked out pretty quickly really was that this is a program that the teachers need to run with the kids. And there's a fairly solid neuroscientific basis for that principle. And with me being in different countries and different states around Australia, etc., that was going to be pretty difficult. And what the program's all about is giving the teachers the opportunity and the autonomy to run it. So it's an online program. And the teachers simply log into our website and run the activities and watch the videos, and they're all brain-based principles that all build upon each other as the years go on. And we start at the earliest to the first day of school or the first year of school. The kids will start all the way up until the last year of school, which again fits with a lot of brain-based principles, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we go along.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love the way that you approach the different age groups and the way that you have these conversations with them about the brain, from the various littlest ones up to those more sophisticated high schoolers. Yeah.
Definitely. The little ones, they're a lot of fun. So our wonderful animator, Raf, who, over the course of the program, he's been in Argentina, he's been in England, he's been in Copenhagen, he's been in Poland. So we're very much a multinational kind of mini little organisation. And Raf has done various things. One of those things is drawing feathers on me. I actually turn into a chicken in one of the and this is for our kind of 6, 7-year-olds. But, the teenagers are a bit of a different kettle of fish. And Dave turning into a chicken probably is in their cupboard. Yeah. So we have to pitch it at a slightly different level. We've had an enormous amount of fun. The kids really enjoy the videos that we produce, and I have a lot of fun doing them too.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting, besides the wonderful work and the way it's taught, is there's this interesting aspect that when you're working with the younger kids, they're quite open, and you're quite open with introducing ideas about the brain from a very physical point of view, and that the kids are very physical. They know all about their arms and legs and so on and so forth. But as we go along through life, we actually become more. We raise our attention levels, or we cut out the attention levels from the neck down until, as you say, you get into teenagers. It's all getting a little bit, don't give me that silly stuff. And then you get to adults, and they say, "Look, I'm sorry, I'm only neck up. Give me the stuff." But they're more resistant in the later years to the technical information than they are when they're very young. So you're also, I find that what you're doing is you're preparing young people to include the brain in their understanding of their body, which is a really terrific thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Richard, if you think about teenagers, when teenagers kind of hit 12, 13, 14, there's this huge shift towards independence. And as anybody who has a teenager, has worked with a teenager, has known a teenager, if you try to control a teenager or take away from their choices, it's not going to turn out well. And one of the theories is around reactance theory, this idea that if you take away choices from people, people will search to or attempt to try to restore their sense of freedom and freedom of choice. So with the teenage program, we have to be really careful around being overly prescriptive or not being overly prescriptive, and allowing them to have a bit of freedom with what they do within the program. Whereas with the littlies, the ones who are 5, 6, 7, and 8, we kind of need to be a little bit more prescriptive to help guide them through the program.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me too, quite apart from the actual content and the science behind it, is the wonderful high production value. It just looks brilliant, and I think that is so important, isn't it, to engage kids, because they're used to high production value on TV and in film, and so if you can have all the best science in the world, but if it's not presented in the brilliant way that you guys do, then they're not going to engage. So I think it's just brilliant the way that it's produced, and that really struck me when I saw your stuff.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. We've got a wonderful team. Our producer, Ben, who just does a wonderful job, and each script takes a long time to think about and carve out and work out what's going to work for an individual kid. And you might not say that, Matt, if you saw my blooper reel, though. For the time, and off air, Richard, you and I were talking about your acting history and your wonderful, your wonderful career there. But mine is still very much growing. I mean, our first day that we shot a grade 3 episode, which is the first ever episode that we shot, an elementary kind of episode, and it took the whole day to shoot it, and I made so many errors. And it's interesting that what that turned into was an episode that is all about making mistakes. This is an episode for grade 2 kids. And we talk about the importance of making mistakes and why our brain actually really loves to make mistakes. And we talk a little bit about prediction errors and why, in life, if we expect everything to go right all the time, then we're going to set ourselves up for quite a bit of disappointment. And at the end of this episode, basically the episode is me making mistakes the whole way through. And, I've got my jacket on the wrong way and all these kind of silly things. And at the end of the episode is a minute blooper reel of me just stuffing up the whole through. So, it's a lot of fun. And I think that's the fun factor. You need that factor, and even as us as adults, without that, learning is really, really difficult.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Now, can we
Jackie Chan, I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember that episode, the movie where he breaks. I think at the end of the movie they show where he breaks his ankle. Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah. It's been broken in Brain Grow thus far, though, I will say.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I'm just wondering about some outcomes. So what have you been able to glean, from the people that are doing the program in terms of outcome?
Yeah, because it's interesting. I'll just sort of add to you do that, because one of the things that I'm noticing is there's a twofold thing. There's an educational and awareness about the brain states, but there's also a lot of philosophy of life that is based on our natural capacities from the brain. So that's sort of just chucking that into that, looking at the outcomes. What are the processes that you're excited about achieving, and do you?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just in terms of those lessons for life you were talking about, Richard, maybe just before I comment on those outcomes, which you can see on the website, we've got those detailed in a PDF as well. But I thought if it's okay, maybe just talking a little bit about where the inspiration from Brain Grow kind of came from. And
absolutely.
Fantastic.
That kind of feeds into that comment you were making, Richard, about principles of life. And it goes back quite a number of years, and I was really blessed that I had some great teachers growing up, and I had a great school that I went to. I really enjoyed it, and my old school, offered me every year to come back to do a careers night, and this is quite a number of years back now, where I went to the careers night. It was the first one I'd been to, so I hadn't been back to my school for maybe 10 years, 15 years, I can't quite remember. And I found myself getting out of the car, and where my school is, it's pretty cold, it's pretty windy, it was the middle of winter, and as soon as I got out of the car, I started to feel really good. I started to feel really positive, and then I walked into the big gym where the careers night was, and my old year level coordinator, who's now the principal, came up to me with this really warm smile and this really warm handshake, and really greeted me. And all these teachers kind of came up to me that I hadn't seen for many, many years. And suddenly I started to feel really positive and really good. And I drove home, and I was kind of thinking, well, maybe I just feel good because, people were really nice to me. But what I actually worked out, what was happening for me, this is kind of my science brain kicking in, was that my implicit memory systems from my early experiences at school were being triggered by those interpersonal and sensory experiences that I was having on that night. And I drove home, and I was feeling on a real high. And what I really reflected on was my experiences in school, and I was really blessed that they were really positive. And what I worked out is that my school was built like the program, and like any good psychotherapy should be, which is from the bottom up, and it was all based upon human relationships and feeling really safe within that school environment. And it was amazing how it completely changed my mood, because I had a really long day that day in the clinic, and I wasn't feeling particularly good or bad, but these interpersonal and sensory experiences, and even the sound of the gravel underneath my feet, which is not a familiar sound. It's a very specific sound to that school. Triggered those memory systems, and really inspired this idea. Well, this Brain Grow needs to be built from the bottom up. And when I say that, obviously we need those subcortical systems really integrated with those higher order systems. And the ultimate part of that is relationships, which is a key reason why I developed it as such that the teacher and the student run the program together, and the students interact with the students. And ultimately, the way I see Brain Grow, it's a social and interpersonal experience, and it's really a huge part of social and emotional learning, which is why kids are, one of our activities is kids walking around lunchtime collecting as many high fives as they can from their other students, and they develop these big signs and they paint them up, and there's lots of artwork that they do, and it's about collecting as many as they can. And we talked a little bit about oxytocin and the importance of those kind of things, and what this does to make us feel safe and attachment, and these are really the core principles of what we talk about in Brain Grow.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Although what I'll say now is a bit oversimplified, but there's a lot of in our culture and in our society is if you do a lot of stuff now, it'll get better tomorrow. Yeah. But actually, the neuroscience tells it is if you want to have a good day tomorrow, it's a really good idea to have a good day today. because the brain and the body orient themselves at a number of levels, from neuronal to genetic to epigenetic to all kinds of deep and difficult things to discuss, based on the experience you're having today. So that's another thing I love about the Brain Grow experience. You go in, and those sorts of the interest in being positive, because that is how I can maintain a greater sense of engagement and interpersonal pleasure for the rest of my life. Is so subtly done. You don't whack them over the head with it. It's just, as you say, suddenly they're walking around the playground doing high fives and going, this is a cool thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that consistency principle of the brain, right? That, the brain wants to fire the same way today as it did tomorrow. And, I think it's interesting too, one of the things I always have to balance when I'm writing the program is, Molly Crockett's got that beautiful TED talk about neurobunk, and this concept that, you can take brain science and, I think we can see this in the media, you can take very sophisticated and finite findings in brain science and then draw these very broad conclusions, which really become not particularly scientific. And when you're writing a program like this, or even when you're in the clinic working with people one-on-one or with families, or with couples, whatever your context, I think we always need to have that in mind. And I remember, Richard, you spoke on a podcast a few weeks ago about something Louis Cozolino said, which was around, in 10 years' time, a lot of what I tell you will be still right, but some of it won't be right. And I just can't tell you which one it will be. And I think that's what we always need to be aware of as scientists, is, always being critical of the work we do, and skeptical, and particularly when we present it to audiences who may not know a lot about the brain as well.
But if your basis is creating positive interpersonal relationships, which hopefully will have that implicit, positive effect like you experienced when you went back to your school, and then with the science laid on top of that, yeah, sure, maybe half the science in 50 years' time will be proven wrong, but you will have created these positive, implicit interpersonal relational memories, and that's got to be very valuable.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's really what inspires me. And I guess, Matt, also, the thoughts around the big principle is that experiences change the brain.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of forces now in young people that are challenging that. One of the things is technology, and how things like screen time can be both really helpful, but not so helpful, and that's probably another 4-hour conversation. But one of the things that we see, I was reading something the other week about this concept of snowplow parenting, or lawnmower parenting, or I think there's what's the other? I think in some of the Nordic countries they call it curling parenting, which is this idea of removing all the adversity in front of your child or in front of your young person. So the parent is in the front, clearing all the adversity away, and the child has this free run into the world. And what you both know clearly about the brain, we all know, is that the brain needs stress to grow, and the brain needs adversity to grow. And without those mild to moderate states of stress or adversity, neuroplasticity just can't happen. And it's such an important message to give to parents, and such an important message to give to teachers, because otherwise, we really run the risk of those experiences not being the kind of quality experiences we need. Because neuroplasticity, it's not a given. It's the brain can change in both healthy and unhealthy ways.
Yeah, because I love the curling example, because it's certainly that thing exactly as you say, as the parents there madly getting all the interferences and blockages out of the way. But it also has a very somewhat, I think it's sinister, but that's too harsh a word, is that they're also doing it in order for the puck, or whatever the thing is in the curling, to land in a predetermined spot that is predetermined as the spot where you should go. And it in one sense, it opens the child up to the parents saying, well, now they can go exactly where they want to go. but actually it's not. It ends up sending kids to places that satisfy the people who are doing the brooming. To where they go, and this thing of change and development, and kids being radical and rebelling and saying, no, I want to go off here. And they say, yeah, but here's the path. And so what we get kids who then, forced by the fact of this helicoptering and snow plowing and curling things, they end off sending themselves off into even harsher environments in order to be individual and different and find their own way.
Yeah, wow. What an interesting and powerful kind of thought process there, Richard, I think.
Yeah. So if we we're talking about controllable incongruence before, and that aspect of creating a certain neural architecture based on the fact that you do have to sort of push the envelope a little and suffer some of that stress, but not uncontrollable incongruence, which of course as parents, we should try and remove uncontrollable incongruence. But when it's controllable incongruence, we have to push through. We have to just, reach a little further, and there's stress involved in that. There's a neural architecture that is developed out of that, which causes the person to be more robust, more broadly. Not just with those specific things that they're pushing through, right? But there's a more broad resilience that is created that is more resilient and adaptable to whatever might come. So, yes, we can snow plow a path with no resistance, but as sure as anything, there's going to be a whole lot of other resistance coming from other directions. And if you haven't built the resilient neural architecture to deal with that, then you're in trouble.
Absolutely.
I was just thinking back in our acting days when we had characters like that. Maybe sort of some of these silly characters. We call them deeply shallow. It was always an interesting thing, and I find the work with Brain Grow. It's not challenging them to go off into quests into the environment and hunt down the saber-toothed tiger, but it's challenging them to face their response ability to create their own brain.
Yeah, wow. And I love that because it kind of dovetails into that discussion about independence we were having before, that as the kids get older, you're going to find more resistance to trying to push them, particularly with certain kids. And it reminds me a little bit of an episode. This one's actually on the website that you can see, and we call this one to be a memory maker. It really highlights all those things that you guys are talking about there. That the key principle here is that what your brain does today will be most likely what it does tomorrow, and then the principle here is who you are today will be who you are tomorrow, and who you are today will help determine who you are in 10 or 20 or 30 years' time. And what you're ultimately doing here with your actions and choices and behaviours as a young person is you're shaping your brain for life. And it really borrows on the Carol Dweck stuff about, your efforts can change your brain, but it also links to our value system. And we get kids kind of walking around the classroom with different values on the floor or blank sheets of paper that they can fill out their own values. And in this particular activity, what we get the kids to do is think about the values that they want to stand for, and who they want to be. And then we develop this little time machine. So the kids paint up this fantastic time machine, and every time they act consistent with a value, they write down the behaviour that they did and they pop it in the time machine and they go into a bucket. That bucket effectively becomes like a time capsule. And at the end of the year, the teachers open up that time capsule and read out all the things, and they ask the kids the question, have you been consistent? Have your actions been consistent with the person that you wanted to be at the start of the year? And something like that really builds upon those neuroplastic idea of, that cells need to continually be stimulated, cells that fire together wire together, but also that consistency principle, and that to change the brain, it takes effort. Without that effort, nothing in the brain will change.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that, Matt. It's not just an online sit around watch a screen course. It's a get up, do stuff, the whole physical movement, and this is what people forget, is that we have a body from the top to toe. Yeah.
Well, this is the whole concept of having an enriched environment, isn't it? I mean, when we talked a little bit before about sort of the on-screen sort of immersion that kids are into, and well, there's a certain amount of enrichment, but it's only on one plane, the virtual world. But when we come into the real world, in the three-dimensional world, we can create a truly enriched environment, and that's exactly what you're doing in this course, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's true. And what all the research say is that learning how to be multi-sensory. The idea, again, that neurobunk, that kids are either left-brained or right-brained, and you still see a lot of that. You hear a lot of people still talking about that concept, and I think that's probably a hark back to the 80s and 90s. And I know you guys did a great episode on the left and right brain a few months back, but there's still some misnomers out there that always need to be corrected. And we talk about integration, and you think about screen time and integrating the default mode network with the executive network with the salience network, and we kind of think about the default mode network being very much linked with autobiographical memories and our sense of self. And that's generally quite active when we're internally reflecting and when we're thinking about our experiences. But if we're continually externally focused, what does that mean for our sense of self and our sense of self and our sense of identity, which is why I don't think for the rest of humankind there will be any substitution for the power of human connection, and why that's so very important. And we talk about the Alan Shaw stuff around right brain to right brain connection, and we teach both in high school and in primary school about that, and why that's so important, and why your facial expressions, your tone of voice, your body language, the intentions you show to people will fundamentally shift the way that other people will approach you. And will you put them into patterns of approach or patterns of withdrawal? And will you get that neural traffic, as Dan Siegel talks about, with his horizontal integration idea? Will you get your left brain then linking, so your right brain then linking with your left, your logical and courageous left, or are we sending the traffic back down to those subcortical areas to be scared and run away? And it gives us such a responsibility, I think.
Yeah. I love it. Susie, my wife's a body worker and a biologist and lifestyle medicine, and she just every now and again reminds people that 60 to 70% of our biology does nothing but move us.
Wow.
And muscles, tendons, bones, they have no other purpose. So the likelihood that movement frame and that those senses and those things from the neck down have a very, very important effect on the brain and vice versa it's odd that we're actually having to do science research to say, oh yes, they're relevant, but I know we need to do that. But it's just what you're doing, Davis, is you're just bringing it into the awareness now. I mean, John Arden's done this fabulous book on brain, mind, gene, and talking about all those networks and trying to educate adults to get into this broader framework. But you're starting where it needs to start, right back at the early education, because they actually have brains and bodies when they're quite small as well as when they're older.
Definitely. And, ultimately, Richard, those brains at that age, they're both incredibly capable but incredibly vulnerable at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
They're both as changeable and vulnerable. Yeah.
Dave, I'm interested to know a little bit about some of the feedback you're getting from both kids and the teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of gets to that outcome question you were talking about before, Matt. We give a lot of outcome, questionnaires and measures, and there has been a lot of hashtag brain grow kind of happening on these questionnaires, which have been great. And ultimately, the feedback that I'm married to a teacher, so I've had some great training about what works and what doesn't within the school environment. And what we really tried to make this do was be really time efficient. Teachers have incredibly crowded curriculums, and trying to fit everything in is really difficult. So if you give them something that's a bit clunky or difficult, it's not really going to be taken up. And the power of this program really lies in the teacher and the teacher's investment in it and passion about it. So we've tried to make it as automatic as possible. And basically all the teacher has to do is log into the website. And my goal when writing the program is to say, all right, well, David's written a lesson plan for me. And all I have to do is kind of run with it. And the way we think about it is that the teacher learns at the same time. So the teacher has some professional development while the kids are learning. And the teacher's the one asking the questions and running the activities. And I think the kids really enjoy the experiential activities. They find those really great because you guys were saying before, they're getting up and about and they're interacting with each other. Sometimes they'll take things home, talk to their parents. They'll do little interviews with parents in some of the year levels, talking about resilience and asking their parents about times where they've been resilient. We've got little videos that the parents can watch as well to kind of keep up with the journey that the kids are on during the program, which is really great.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So it sounds like broadly there's a very positive response both from the kids on one frame and from the teachers as well. As you say, that's on the website. People can actually have a look at the figures and the graphs.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, spot on. Yeah, that's exactly right, Richard. And they can have a look at that. And that's really it's really about the kids feeling like they are learning some principles for life and really building upon it. So what the research and education will talk about is if you can link learning to previously held concepts, then that learning is going to be much stronger. And that kind of makes a lot of sense. So it's why we build it from year to year. And one of the concepts we talk about in the early years is the brain tree. And this is the way that we think about neural integration. So we've got our subcortical regions, which represent the roots of the tree. And without those roots, that tree is going to fall over very, very quickly. And then the top of the tree, the canopy, represents our cortex and our smart brain. And the trunk represents the integration between those two and all the wonderful networks that we have. And you can't have a brain without any of those parts, just like you can't have a tree without any of those parts. And the kids build their smart brain and they add leaves to their smart brain as time goes on and all the wonderful things that they've done. And the tree at the bottom, we talk about the different emotional experiences you have and why they're actually really, really important. Even things like fear and why fear is important. Also, why stress is important, I should say, and why we want to move away from fear-based systems.
Yeah. That thing stress, that thing, the demand, and so. Just this broad, whole broad scope of stuff that's going on, and I'm just looking at that. I don't know. This is are we getting to a point where we kind of need to wrap up a little bit? Just looking at that beautiful little roundup you gave of getting into all those aspects and the slightly more technical sort of end. But
is there anything about like the future? So is there like a short comment that you'd like to make about where you're going with the?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, at the moment we're across Australia, and we're certainly looking to get an international presence as well. We're in multiple states across Australia now, and that's been really, really great. And ultimately what we're doing is just wanting to add more content to the program to kids' experience and add some more parent material as well. And going out to schools as well and running PDs with the teachers, which is really, really important as well, so to make sure that they get an understanding of what's happening too. So really it's about gradual expansion and continuing to add, which again is that controlled incongruence idea. I think I need a little bit of that for my brain too, where we want to just build gradually, but there's lots of wonderful content that's already there and the kids across Australia are really enjoying.
Well, we really hope that this expands beautifully and it enriches in the ways that you've been doing. I just can't see it going anywhere but in the best direction at the moment. It's just I really love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Dr. Dave Collins, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing with us about Brain Grow, and we will direct everyone to that website so they can check it out themselves. And we wish you all the very best in the future.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate your time, Richard. I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to come on. I've had many of my friends and colleagues run these podcasts, and it's an absolute privilege. And the quality of your work is just outstanding, and it's an honour to be part of it. So thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. We'll see. We'll see you when our brains grow. Fantastic.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank
Bye
you,
for now.
Okay. Right.